So my name's Darrin Moore. I'm the head of Project Kirk this year, and a huge fan of Russell. And so since I know none of you, I'm just dying to know. Have you read Russell? Do you know Russell Kirk's work? For those of us who have had our lives transformed, and I'm not using any hyperbole in using that word, by the writings of Russell Kirk. For folks that have known Russell all of, and what an impact he has made on the movement, on conserving intellectual thought. It's always exciting to be the folks that get to introduce Russell Kirk to everybody else. So Russell Kirk has been called the prophet of conservatism by Ronald Reagan. Russell Kirk was known as the sage of Mecosta, Michigan. And very few people realize how he nourished the roots of intellectual America's philosophical heritage, and begun a series of essays once a month in The Current out of Ann Arbor. Kirk was the son of a locomotive engineer, and he was raised alongside the railroad tracks in Plymouth, Michigan. However, he would come to see, and he would see more deeply than most, many facets of America's history and its society. He would work in factories for Henry Ford, in the military for Uncle Sam, in academia for behemoth universities, and among the ivory towers of politics for publishers and for presidents. In fact, there's a lovely story about Nixon that Jim Person tells at the beginning of his biography, who is also another Kirk scholar from Michigan. Kirk was stoically independent, and from atop Heidi Hill, his ancestral home in Mecosta, he enriched and reinforced a massive movement by writing some 30-plus books and thousands of articles and columns, many of which can be read at kirkcenter.org. So I would encourage all of you that after today that you go to this website. Kirk's book, The Conservative Mind, in 1953 landed like a bombshell on an intellectual scene. And think about what 1953 was. At that time, there was really, people basically believed that there were only two political alternatives: the old liberals and the new style, the newfangled progressive left. Kirk excavated and recovered conservatism's long, unbroken chain of steely and supple thinking, from Edmund Burke and our founding fathers to Irving Babbitt and T.S. Eliot. The book in 1953 reinvigorated and reaffirmed the right with arguments that could not be dismissed by the fanatics for change and the servants of centralization. By defining just what it is that conservatives actually aim to conserve, Kirk reclaimed the term conservative as the proper label for the movement. Prior to that, if we use John Stuart Mill's expression, we were just called the idiot party at the time. It's a little warm in here, isn't it? Making clear that conservatism is the negation of ideology rather than a narrow set of dogmata to be rigidly applied to revolutionary schemes for transforming society, Kirk put flesh on the body of opinion and first principles cherished by conservatives, and then draped it in a fine wardrobe of sparkling prose. The breadth and depth of his life's work is immense, but he winnowed down complex ideas into easily understandable explanations and enduring truths. Although Kirk believed in the dignity of man, he understood that human nature is fixed, a mix of good and evil, and requires prudent restraints according to the permanent moral truths. This is a big topic that Kirk talks about, normative truths, in his book, The Enemies of the Permanent Things. He explained how the high degrees of liberty could be continuously achieved only by justly ordered societies, justly ordered liberty, ordered freedom, as opposed to this expansionist, anything goes type of freedom. These societies needed to be comprised of communities of citizens who share a general consensus regarding moral customs and conventions. This explains why multiculturalism has failed so terribly, is because we've tried to put all of these different types of societies, of different customs and conventions, to work together inside of the same community. Rather than dull conformity, the product of the utilitarian standardization and consolidation, Kirk felt an affection for the infinitely proliferating variety and mystery of life. He prescribed cultivating genuine personality through self-mastery, inner ordering of the soul, by conforming to those normative truths that we mentioned earlier. And he was against the specialism and the egotistical individualism that finds itself lonely in a crowd of fragmented mass men. Although a fierce defender of man's right to property, Kirk grasped that man had a higher calling, and Dr. Patrick's going to be talking about this today. Man has a higher calling than being merely a producing and consuming animal. Possessions and enterprise provide powerful motives for achievement and honor, but also they're motives to avarice and to envy. If government disrespects man's right to the fruit of his labors, it provides for him what he should earn for himself. It robs him of his integrity and initiative. Kirk recognized that market enterprise is the great spring of society. Market enterprise, not free market capitalism, but rather market enterprise. And this great spring of society was great for society, but also mere materialism makes men into little more than atomized appetites. He looked back through history and saw that a rise in the wealth of nations often led to a poverty of spirit and a dangerous expansion of desires that could be a civilization's undoing. The old bread and circuses that brought down Rome that we may be experiencing today. He knew that to be truly rich, a person needed to have the unbought grace of life that can be acquired only from the store of wisdom after a sustained apprenticeship to the sublime. Finally, although Kirk saw that we must reform in order to conserve, that change is the means of our preservation, quoting Edmund Burke, he was a champion of the permanent things. The permanent things is a big expression that he got from T.S. Eliot that he used throughout all of his books, how conservatives' job are to defend these greater traditions that are handed down to us from a society of this great bequest. The permanent things, and there's the second essay that's in there is about the permanent things themselves, are the venerated ideas, traditions, norms, and moral standards which have been ratified by the entire human experience, and which have converted the brute into the civil social man. He realized that all luxuries and advantages of our society, that our society affords, are the product of civilization's long and intricate experiential development, and that to fool with the nature of our enduring order leads to folly. Kirk understood that our short time this side of eternity is charged with duty to preserve and pay forward to posterity the wisdom of our ancestors. He drew his sword of moral imagination against the enemies of virtue, beauty, and the established order, against revolutionaries of all stripes. He was counter-revolutionary in every regard. Whose schemes, these revolutionary schemes, promise heaven on earth, but in reality would deliver only a new set of terrestrial hells. Considering the arid wastelands of today's political discourse, rediscovering Russell Kirk's elegant wisdom can be as reviving as steady rains after a long drought.